G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day so far, a fantastic week, and this one will be shorter than yesterday's, I promise, but we do, as always, have a lot to go over. So of course, we're going to look at the maps and some geolocations that are interesting to this, as well as some footage about some temporary bridges getting taken out. But there's another thing interesting in this that I don't see that many talking about. Then we're going to look at the maps in the east, of course, where Russia is making ground. We'll look at something interesting about New York and Avdiivka and talk about what the future may hold here. And then we need to look at a policy the Ukrainian government has put through banning then a church. And we'll look at some history around people within churches being used for intelligence gathering, as well as what this means. And does this link up with something Putin put out only the day prior? And I want to talk about, linked in with all of this, I want to talk about interference with the US election and potentially where the Kremlin sit on that. So let's start with the north. I've been doing that recently as it is the hottest topic spoken about and the reason a lot of you are probably here. So here is Ukraine in the center. Here is the capital of Kyiv. The red areas occupied by Russia since 2022. The purple since 2014. Green is area where Russia has been and has been pushed out or has withdrawn. Blue is then Ukrainian ground taken either back off the Russians or taken inside Russia. It almost should be a different color up in here because that's a different thing rather than liberated to then taking more ground. Either way. And we'll head up into the north between Sumy and Kursk, where Ukraine has had this incursion into Russia and does hold a significant portion of land. We spoke about the bridges being taken out yesterday. Now, this map here shows no changes, but we do have changes on Noel reports as well as Syriac, and I'll show you those in 1 second. One thing I see that's interesting in here is I see a lot of like pro-Ukrainian accounts showing this Kursk offensive and pointing at language, religion, maybe ethnicity of a lot of people in the villages here being occupied by Ukraine currently as like a justification for a land takeover or a movement into here. And I might just suggest that maybe this isn't the greatest argument in Ukraine's favor when we look at that argument being used in other areas by maybe another side. But regardless, let's have a look at what's happening in here. Now, what I first want to show you is we spoke about the bridges, the three primary bridges across the same river being taken down by Ukrainian missiles. And yesterday we looked then at temporary bridges being put up. Now, one of the temp bridges, bring this footage up, was this that we showed. Now, we showed this image, we geolocated this, and then the next day we actually see that this has been removed. So that bridge has removed somewhere as there is some evidence of some fires around here too. Now I want to show you more on this as well. So let me show you the geolocation of this. The bridge was just down in the vicinity of where my cursor is. Now this geolocation where I've got this dot here, we have then footage coming out of Ukrainian drones striking Russian engineering vehicles. So we can see through here, coming through, and then drone basically in the front of this engineering vehicle here, as well as we see, now I can't confirm if this is where that bridge was getting dismantled or put together, but regardless, we can see a drone flying then into a Russian engineering, then excavator vehicle, and this here. Now, I presume that this is the same location as here, but I don't have the skill to geolocate that, but I presume that is all in the same area. To me, it lines up basically perfectly, and we can see other drone footage here just showing the amount of fires. And as you can see, there's been a hell of a lot going on here, striking then these engineering vehicles all in this area. Now, firstly, yes, striking engineering vehicles being taken out, of course, affects the strategy tactics in here of the Russian forces being able to go to and from. But another very interesting thing in here I don't think many people are mentioning is the distance. So let's take this. Now, let's jump across onto this map. Now, as I always say, this map isn't as closely following this front as some others, but we'll use it because a few hundred meters won't matter. Now, where this is right here, where these drones are flying. So let's zoom out, and I'll leave my cursor basically in location. Now, get our ruler, and we'll come from here to the nearest grey zone is, say, 13 kilometres. Nearest controlled is, say, about 17. And then back down to the Sumy-Russian border is about 14 kilometres. So what I'm saying is here, these FPV drones are working at a very, very long range. Typically, FPV drones have a very, very short range. So there has been an extended range on these, or range extenders, or being used by a DRG element a lot further on than where this is being shown. I think that is a very interesting piece, and the Russian forces should be concerned about these drones having that much range in an FPV capacity, well behind the line, being able to fly around and move. So that is interesting with those bridges taken out. Now, what we've spoken about in here over the last at least, say, few days, is where the Sime River runs somewhere like down this, that Ukraine, for a westerly, easterly pincer in here and occupy this area in here. Now, how many Russians are in this area? We have no idea. But how large is this? About 700 square kilometres. With those bridges in here, could be looking to occupy that area for further on deals, negotiations, or POWs stuck in here not being able to get back across the Sime River. So let's then have a look at the maps in here and have a look at where some things are changing. Now, there's a lot of discussion around Kotonovo and if there is a Ukrainian presence inside of Kotonovo. Now, there's a lot of discussion about this as well. So let's have a zoom in on both these maps. Both the NOEL reports, Deep State, are showing a small amount of break-in by confirmed ground. Now, we do have a geolocation here. So this is a Ukrainian vehicle. There's actually a few strikes in this in the video, but is burning up after a strike here. Now, the reason we show this is because the geolocation is the interesting part. Now, where we see is these reservoirs. This is reservoir. Yeah, this reservoir here. And then we see right on the corner, right where my cursor is, that is where then that vehicle was destroyed. So we know there is at least some presence here, likely not at this location as per the grey zone, then actually holding this ground. So where that is though, if we skip onto this map, we come back, so we're talking right about here, is shown as blue then on this map. This is why this is very difficult to tell at the moment due to a highly fluid front line. It's difficult to know exactly where things are moving. NOEL report still doesn't show this movement into Tyankovo that I've seen multiple other maps, even on the Russian side, actually show. That's why it's important to have multiple different maps to then look at. Now, let's have a look here. So we do see that there is a Ukrainian advancement today out to the north and out to sort of northeast of Sudzha as well. So continuing then movement out. But one thing we have seen, and we knew this would happen with initial advancements, is then a slowing down of kilometre squares gained day to day as this gets larger and larger. That is just part of warfare that will slow down, not only as reinforcements come in, but as you have then a larger area to man, sustain, logistics, rotation, all of the above elements. Now, while we are looking then at the maps, let's line up the Syriac to NOEL reports map in here, both tracking this. Now, Syriac does show movement up to Kotonovo, but not to the same degree these other maps are. That there was movement up right about here is where we saw then that vehicle destroyed, and movement out to the east, of Sudzha here. So on this axis, Ukrainian army is gradually establishing itself on the outskirts of Kotonovo. Attacks reached the streets of the town, but were eventually repelled by Russian forces. At Sudzha axis, Ukrainian forces captured the locality of Agarom and attacked the adjacent Ruska Konopepka, where the attack was repelled by Russian troops. In addition, Ukrainian troops continue increasing the area around here to secure the locality out to the west. That clashes continue on the front. So this is an area we will continue to watch and see what is happening out here. Now, an interesting thing for me is actually this photograph here, shared by Pages. Now, there is a part cropped out of this. I've cropped that out, and it was blurred regardless, of an Australian Bushmaster that actually had been destroyed in Kursk. For those who are unaware, I was a crew commander of a Bushmaster for a number of months on operations, and it's just such a weird thing to see an Australian Bushy in Russia. You can see where the V-shaped hull is down here. Now, the V-shaped hull like this, if you drive over an IED, it directs the explosion out away from the crew and all this will come off, but heavily destroyed. Something's taken out its bloody tushy here very, very heavily. Again, these are a lightly armoured vehicle. 50 cal will start punching through one of these very, very quickly. They're a PMV, a protected mobility vehicle, not like an infantry fighting vehicle going into the fight. That is why we will see larger weapons really tear these open like a bloody tin of tuna. So let's then have a look at the maps and see where other areas are moving. So we'll shift back onto the deep state map here. We'll turn on so we can actually see that the red check is Russian advancement within the last 24 hours. Now, what we see, we come down into the Pokrovsk front. We can see an expansion of control out near Novhorodka and as well further out from Zvetny as well, moving down in this open territory and as well in the direction of Pokrovsk. So let's compare this then to Suryak's map in this area. Now, again, the movement in the same vicinity is the same. So in around this Zvetny Mykolaiivka front, as well as this push near Olivka, Novhorodka as well. So we know there's movement in the similar area. Situation, Pokrovsk front, Russian army took control of the locality of Komashivka and began attacking Pitchy. Combats with Ukrainian army are taking place. There also troops began advancing south of Zvetny. In addition, Russian forces advanced along the railway, the M30, so we're talking just here. Road taking control of a series of positions southeast outskirts of Novhorodka. Moreover, small advances was made by the Russians inside Horovka and this street. So some advances along here. Of course, potentially a southerly push as well to try and get to Pokrovsk. Now, how long might this take to get to Pokrovsk? Well, it has taken the best part or over of 6 months to get from Avdiivka to this point, and then we do presume Pokrovsk is very, very defended. So probably still a number of months, even continuing at this pace and this intensity for that break in and movement in, probably still a very long time. So let's pick up and move then to just northeast of here, and we will talk about this New York and Toretsk front. So something very interesting on this map is, look at New York, forget about this for a sec, is this. Now, we reported yesterday that there was rumors that there is an amount of Ukrainian forces that are surrounded in New York. Now, by this map here, unless they've put something in incorrect, it does tend to show that there is contested territory surrounded completely by Russian-controlled territory. Now, again, this controlled territory is basically one street on each side. It's not like it's a massive fat portion. But that is what this map is showing. We reported that. We'd heard about that for a couple of days. We're not exactly sure what is going on here, but I'll keep you guys up to date as much as I know. But you can see more Russian advancement in Toretsk and then taking more of Druzhba up in the northeast of where we're looking at New York. So let's then have a quick look at the Suryak map, see where things are moving. As we can see, a similar area at least. We look where this road then runs east-west and a movement out towards Druzhba right in here. So funnily, the Ukrainian map here actually shows more control right where my cursor is than the Suryak map in here. So we do know there has been some more fighting going on here and this continuing to move, and this should be of a concern for the defensive works in here, but also the open ground that lays behind this and the pressure it can put onto Konstantinivka and Chasiv Yar, especially with this push out towards then Pokrovsk. So speaking of Chasiv Yar, Bakhmut, let's actually move up to here. Now, what we can see today is a change on this map that we haven't seen for a long time. So to the northwest of Boronivka, we do see a Russian advancement into the territory up here. Now, one thing we also see is green check here. Now, green check, according to me, is a map correction that is older than 2 weeks old. Otherwise, it would be blue, because blue is Ukrainian advancement newer than 2 weeks. Now, this isn't shown to the same extent out to the north here, but Suryak is saying that there is advancement in Chasiv Yar in a different area. That east of Chasiv Yar, during the last 3 weeks, situation changes. The town suffered minimal changes, with the Russian army making small advances along the streets. In here, Ukrainian army recovered areas adjacent of the Novi district and trying to consolidate a trench line along the canal. So just south of here, that Ukraine did manage to take back some territory then along the canal, but it is showing that, right where my cursor is here, that Russia do hold a piece across the canal in this area right here. So again, it is so difficult to know what is going on street-to-street fighting like this, but we'll keep you up to date once the maps show, I guess, the same thing. That's when we go, yep, okay, that is what is happening. But that is the only changes we have on this map today. But we do have one more Syriac update. So we come down Novomalyivka, Konstantinivka. This hasn't moved for a while here, but Syriac basically daily at this point is showing that there is some advancement in here. So we have Pataskovskia by this red dot here. We see this reservoir that Syriac is saying that the Russian forces are, say, 30% into Konstantinivka, all the way through Pataskovskia and advancing to then the northeast. So again, hard to know where the grey zone, where the red zone actually is lying here, but we get somewhat of an idea where things then may be moving, but no other changes shown on this map today. So there's been a lot of discussion around the Ukrainian government then banning a church that they say is affiliated to Russia. So let's have a look over this, and then I want to talk about collective punishment, churches, values, and elections as well in this. So let's just go over the AP article. I've read a heap of articles on this. I think this one's maybe the most clear. Ukraine's parliament has banned the activities of religious groups tied to the Russian Orthodox Church or any other faith group supporting Russia's invasion. The bill creates legal tools for the government to ban the activity of any religious group deemed to be too closely connected to Russia or to support its invasion of Ukraine. So this is one of the questions, is how close or support actually is it? Where is, I guess, the line in the sand? Is it anyone with an alternative view? Is it direct support from the Kremlin? That is, I guess, the question that needs to be asked, is where's that clear line in the sand? The Rada approved a bill on Tuesday with 265 affirmative votes and only 29 opposed. As we can see in this here, you've probably seen this many times on this channel, 265 approved and 29 then opposed. So what we're talking about here is the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, who proclaimed its loyalty to Ukraine and insisted it broken ties from the authority of the Russian Orthodox Church, but the Ukrainian government says it remains canonically tied to the Russian Church and its Moscow-based patriarch, who has depicted the Russian invasion of Ukraine as a holy war. This is where this gets a little bit then fuzzy. A large majority of Ukrainians are Orthodox, but they're divided into two main groups with similar names, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which would not be affected by the legislation. What we're talking is the Orthodox Church of Ukraine is not affected. Many Ukrainians continue to call the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate, as it was commonly known despite its recent claims to independence. The bill authorises the government to investigate suspect religious groups. The bill explicitly prohibits activities of the Russian Orthodox Church, calling it an ideological extension of the regime and the aggressor state, and an accomplice to war crimes and crimes against humanity. So anything to do with this is participant actively in these crimes. The Ukrainian Orthodox Church has had centuries-long affiliation with the Russian Orthodox Church. 3 months after Russia's invasion of 2022, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church declared its full self-sufficiency and independence from Moscow, and has repeatedly declared its loyalty and called members to fight for Ukraine as sacred duty. But many Ukrainians remain suspicious of the church. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, criminal proceedings have initiated against 100 clerics of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church for alleged war-related crimes. The security services of Ukraine said 50 of them had already been charged, and some of these clerics had been swapped back as well in POW exchanges. But a lawyer representing the UAC denounced the legislation as a grotesque violation of religious freedom. Amsterdam, this bloke here, this attorney Robert Amsterdam, called the measure religious cleansing. He insisted that the new law makes it impossible for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to defend itself because it targets any religious organisation that the Russian Orthodox Church claims in its own governing documents. Said the UAC can't control what the ROC, the Russian Orthodox Church, charter. So if the Russian Orthodox Church claim that they are tied to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church gets banned in this. And of course, that may not actually have any influence on what this then claims. And this is what he says, it makes it impossible for this church to defend itself. He noted, the bill also targets any religious organisation whose authorised persons are convicted for crimes against Ukraine's security, and said that it amounts to illegal collective punishment. The Ukrainian bill prohibits any religious organisation promoting Russian world ideology. Now, one thing I will say about collective punishment, if you read anything about insurgency, counterinsurgency, warfare as a whole, collective punishment is very dangerous and can turn people or reinforce ideas very quickly. On collective punishment, though, I do think it could potentially be very dangerous when you are punishing a whole group rather than individuals in these churches. But again, I understand it's very difficult. But if we look at some writings from KGB defectors or people of archivists from then the KGB, of course, the Soviet Union's intelligence agency, we speak then about actually the use of churches. So let's look at this. Looking back at his career in the KGB, Oleg Kulygin concludes, like the stranglehold over the church inside the Soviet Union, the penetration and exploitation of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad was, quote, one of the most sodded and little-known chapters in the history of our organisation, being the KGB. Mitrokhin, who's an archivist for KGB at the time, came to the same conclusion, commenting at one point in his notes that the files contain a whirlpool of filth. The KGB uses agents among Russian Orthodox clergy in the West, not merely to spy on immigrant communities, but also to identify against possible agent recruits. Though the Russian Orthodox Church in North America was split, the faction remained loyal to the Moscow Patriarchate. So speaking about then the idea of the churches being used. So of course I'm not a fan of the collective punishment of these people's faith and this church, but I could see where some of these intelligence agencies are probably then looking. Now, there's another quote in here that I do actually want to read, maybe not directly in relation to this, but I think overall it makes sense. And this is from a KGB case officer. When a country declares itself to be the most powerful and the richest, and its government the smartest and possesses the best weapon, that is not maturity, it's bragging, and is the reason for the downfall of all the powerful nations of the past. Pride comes before a fall. Now, one thing that we did see before this came out, the day before, what we reported on yesterday was Putin's decree offering a safe haven to people trying to escape Western liberal ideals. Now, in this, knowing the knowledge of Russian language, Russian history, basic laws, traditional Russian spiritual and moral values, that Russia will open its borders for people to come across. And I do wonder if this came out the day before they knew the vote was happening in the Ukrainian parliament, maybe as an idea to get people across into Russia from Ukraine who it would see are being demonized by these laws being put forth. I think this is an interesting time frame of these two things happening. That's maybe reaching, but I think that is something to talk about. Now, US election, where we'll tie in with this. Today, on the betting, both Trump and Harris are equal at $1.83. So I want to talk about these conservative values thing and why I think many of the Western leaders, the Western mainstream media, is actually incorrect when they state that there will be Russian influence on the election benefiting Trump's campaign. Because I actually think it could be the opposite, and I've spoken about this. Firstly, this in itself is actually done, I believe, as a propaganda election interference to discredit Trump's campaign. That's firstly what I actually think of that. I think they're doing the same thing they're trying to call out. But regardless, Trump has painted himself as a conservative traditionalist, and Putin is trying to paint the West, like with this and like with other operations we've spoken about, as this neoliberal loss of values, loss of traditional family, religion, ultra-progressive, and demonizing these traditional values. And I think Russia and China are banking that this will actually be the downfall of the Western dominance around the world. Now, what I see to this is Trump is the kryptonite to these assumptions and political views. If the Kremlin and Putin are trying to paint the West as this ultra-progressive, lefty, neoliberal, and then you get Trump, why would they back Trump on that? It doesn't seem to align with how they're viewing the West and what they're putting out there about the West in the world, regardless maybe of personal relationships. I don't see with the unconventional warfare campaign as a whole, I don't see that that actually lines up. I think if there's Kremlin interference in the elections, I honestly think it actually could be aimed at the opposite. And many have spoken about that there is this rift between where Iran's trying to push the election, where the Kremlin is trying to push it. How much actual influence do these outside parties have on the election opposed to the mainstream media trying to discredit one side or the other? I would question that, like how much Is it 1%? Is it 10%? Is it 0.1%? I also don't know. But the messaging coming out of the Kremlin about these traditional values and this and that, why then, if they see that as the fallover of the West, why would they try to discredit someone who's trying to instill that in the West? That's my part here, that I think it could be the opposite. If they're going, this will be the downfall of the West, is this idea of, I guess, like ultra progressive values, the loss of religiosity, the loss of the nuclear family. If they're saying that that is the downfall here, you'd think they'd interfere to try and push that along, not someone who is fighting back, I guess, against that. That's why I say be very careful with anything about the election and maybe where ulterior motives could be. And you could easily say that I'm doing the exact same thing now. Maybe I'm trying to have an interview. I'm not trying to interfere at all. I'm not a voter. Either way, I don't fucking know what's going to happen. But that's the way that I see it with my understanding of the messaging putting out versus what the candidates stand for. Either way, legends, have a fantastic day. And I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.